average as well. Still quite chilly, though, in the wind across the far north. But the chillier feel does return by the end of Sunday. Wet and windy weather pushing across the country on Sunday. So a rather unsettled day. Not a brilliant one to be getting out and about, but I hope you have some indoor lunchtime plans for Sunday. The unsettled weather does continue into the start of next week, but there are signs of the spring sunshine returning later on. Bye-bye.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
GB Loyalty Points is here. They're our way of saying thank you for spending time with GB News. Through commenting on your say, voting in You Decide polls and shaping the debate, you can earn GB Loyalty Points. Unlock rewards, reach milestones and climb leaderboards. Don't just watch our programmes, come and be part of them. Get started by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/loyalty points.
Everything you need to enjoy a super summer could be on us this year, as you could drive away with this very latest Benivan 4-berth camper van. This camper van is fully equipped with its own kitchen, bathroom, dinette and plenty of storage. We'll also get your summer sorted with a further £25,000 in tax-free cash that you could spend however you like. For another chance to win a camper van and cash, text prize to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB20 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of May. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Welcome to Friday Night with me, Matt Goodwin, right here on GB News, the People's Channel, where I speak up for you, the forgotten majority. Coming up on tonight's show. The woke Bank of England has outraged the British people by announcing that it could replace historical figures like Winston Churchill on our banknotes with an otter. Is that natural progress, or is this erasing our cultural heritage? We're going to be debating that with a top expert. And the FBI says that a gunman driving a truck filled with explosives who rammed a synagogue in Michigan was a targeted attack of violence against the Jewish community. So when will the West start to get serious about the mortal threats in our midst? Just how long can we expect our Jewish communities to live like this? We'll be debating that with a top expert too. And here in the UK, asylum system chaos. 2 asylum seekers have been jailed for running a county lines operation from a migrant hotel funded by taxpayers. As it's revealed that up to 2/3 of the funding that's going to police the small boat crossings in northern France is coming from the British taxpayers. We're going to be debating what's going on in our broken asylum system tonight. And lastly, are we witnessing a blasphemy law through the back door? Free speech campaigners are planning a legal challenge to block the Labour government's definition of anti-Muslim hostility, as a dozen Labour councils have told local schools that children's drawings of the Prophet Muhammad, among other religious figures, could be considered blasphemous under Sharia law. What on earth is going on? We're going to be debating all that tonight. Now, I'll also be joined tonight by my panel, commissioning editor at The Spectator, Lara Brown, and Labour councillor for Waltham Forest Council, Councillor Sebastian Salek. As ever, let me know your views tonight at gbnews.com/yoursay. And of course, friends of GB News can vote in today's You Decide poll for free by scanning the QR code right now. We're asking this question because we're going to debate it in the show tonight. Is removing Winston Churchill from our banknotes the slow erosion of our national memory? Let us know what you think about that, and we'll bring you those results at the end of the show. But now it's time for the news.
Good evening. It's just gone 8 o'clock. These are your top stories this hour. Sir Keir Starmer's ethics advisor has rejected an inquiry into Peter Mandelson's appointment as the US ambassador. Sir Laurie, the independent advisor on ministerial standards, said there were no grounds for an investigation. It follows accusations of a lack of prime ministerial involvement in the appointment. But Downing Street has said there was no requirement for Sir Keir Starmer to formally interview Lord Mandelson for the US ambassadorship. Number 10, though, conceded there were lessons to be learned from the process, but insisted due diligence was followed before the peer was given the Washington job. Elsewhere, the US president says that Iran will be hit very hard over the next week. It comes amid reports Donald Trump is deploying 5,000 US Marines to the Middle East to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Mr. Trump has repeatedly insisted the US is winning the war and that Iran's military resources have been significantly reduced since the start of the conflict. The US president also told Fox News he thinks Vladimir Putin might be helping Iran a little bit. Meanwhile, the US State Department has offered a $10 million reward for information about Iran's new supreme leader and other top officials. It comes after US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said Iran's new supreme leader is in hiding, wounded and likely disfigured.
We know the new so-called not-so-supreme leader is wounded and likely disfigured. He put out a statement yesterday, a weak one, actually, but there was no voice and there was no video. It was a written statement. He called for unity. Apparently killing tens of thousands of protesters is his kind of unity. Iran has plenty of cameras and plenty of voice recorders. Why a written statement? I think you know why. His father, dead. He's scared, he's injured, he's on the run, and he lacks legitimacy. It's a mess for them.
Meanwhile, back in the UK, petrol retailers have been holding talks with the Chancellor after initially pulling out of the meeting. It's after the Petrol Retailers Association accused ministers of using inflammatory language that has led to the abuse against forecourt workers. This comes as conflict in the Middle East is driving oil prices higher. Rachel Reeves has been speaking in the last few hours.
We all know that families are watching very closely at the moment the price at the pumps, and we are determined as a government to do everything we can to keep those prices as low as possible. We wanted to speak to retailers because I do want us to work together to keep supply stable, to reassure the public and make sure that price rises are limited to what is absolutely necessary and no more.
Those are the latest GB News headlines. I'll have more for you in an hour.
Take the GB News family with you on any device. As long as you have an internet connection, tune into GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond.
Welcome back to Friday Night with me, Matt Goodwin, right here on GB News. Now, the removal of historical figures like Winston Churchill from English banknotes might seem rather trivial, but it really isn't, because this isn't about banknote design. It's about something much deeper, something more insidious. The slow erosion of our national memory and indeed our identity. Across Britain and much of the West, we are witnessing what the sociologist Frank Furedi has called a war against the past. A growing alliance of radical activists, bureaucrats who are wedded to diversity, equity and inclusion policies, and increasingly compliant institutions. Well, that alliance is quietly reshaping how nations remember and think about themselves. We all know the pattern. It's very familiar by now. Statues come down. Historical figures are reframed as problematic or divisive. Buildings are suddenly renamed. School reading lists and university reading lists are decolonized, and the past is retold in a way that focuses almost exclusively on our so-called sins while forgetting our country's achievements. Even the small symbols of everyday life, the images on our currency, the names of our streets, the monuments in our squares are gradually, slowly edited out. And what replaces them? Usually nothing meaningful at all. Instead of figures who shaped our nation, we get neutral, value-free imagery, landscapes, wildlife, abstract designs. Now, on the surface, this might seem pretty harmless, but these symbolic changes really do matter. For centuries, historical figures acted as cultural signposts in our country, reminders of the struggles, achievements, and sacrifices that shaped our country and our ancestors. If you remove those signposts, something subtle begins to happen. The past becomes distant, then it becomes contested, and eventually it becomes disposable. Gradually, the story of a nation, its triumphs, its failures, its defining moments, is hollowed out. And in its place emerges a much thinner idea of identity, of who we are. A version of Britain, a version of England that's defined not by our history or our traditions, but by the abstract celebration of diversity. In other words, the only thing that is now meant to define us is that we have no defining identity at all. As the philosopher Sir Roger Scruton once said, a society that loses its memory eventually loses its identity. And that loss rarely happens overnight. It happens slowly, through hundreds of small decisions, a statue removed here, a school curriculum changed over there, a historical figure quietly removed from a banknote. Each step seems minor, but together they amount to something much more profound, a slow disconnection from our own past. As George Orwell once said, the most effective way to destroy a people is to erase their understanding of their history. That's why this matters, not because of a banknote, but because of the much larger cultural story it represents. Now, to discuss all of this, I'm delighted to introduce military and NATO historian Peter Caddick-Adams. Peter, what was your initial reaction when you read this story about historical figures such as Winston Churchill being removed from our banknotes?
I was horrified. And of course, this isn't just Winston Churchill, it's Jane Austen, it's J.M.W. Turner, our finest landscape artist, it's Alan Turing, who practically is... these are front-row British historical figures whose names will be around, hopefully, in 1,000 years' time. And a committee in the Bank of England seem to have taken it upon themselves to remove these iconic figures from our banknotes. I mean, I rather thought this was our money, not the Bank of England's. They print the notes, the Queen has her signature. So this is our choice. And I gather there was some kind of public inquiry that they held last year. Didn't come my way, I have to say. And the outrage is shared around the country.
Peter, isn't it the case? And obviously, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, but what about this argument? Let's just play devil's advocate for a minute. There are people who would say, look, these historical figures, they've had their moment in the sun. For the next 10, 20, 30 years, we're going to celebrate nature and wildlife, and then we'll come back around and no doubt we'll have somewhat different historical figures that perhaps the ruling class wants to celebrate. But what about this idea that actually we should show a different side of Britain?
Well, 2 points. One is that most other countries around the world put their iconic figures on their banknotes. I mean, that's a long-established history. There's no need to change that. The second is, if we're going to go soft on animals, then they're all going to be European animals. I mean, what we're talking about is the pound, the British pound, the pound sterling. I'm struggling to think of an animal that we could come up with that's particularly English that you wouldn't find somewhere on the continent, around Europe, or indeed around the rest of the world. That's why historical figures are safe. They tell you about the nationality that the pound represents, and they form an educational purpose. I'm not quite sure we need to teach children about badgers or bats or otters, but we do need to teach them about Winston Churchill, and this seems to me an incredibly cheap and easy way to do that.
Well, as I mentioned in my monologue there are other experts, Frank Furedi, a very well-known sociologist, who would say that what this is about, I mean, in his book, I've read it, it's certainly had an impact on me, The War Against Our Past. He would say that's exactly what this is. It's a culture war. It is an attempt to delegitimize the deeper foundations of our nation state, to wipe the slate clean and to replace those reference points with, as you say, universal symbols, with things that basically could be relevant in all kinds of different national contexts. I mean, isn't that essentially what this is about, sort of flattening the things that once made us distinctive, once made us unique, and actually just turning us into a sort of piece of territory in the wider globalist blanket, so that there's nothing really distinctive about us at all?
Well, of course, I'm a historian, and I thoroughly object to the way history is gradually edged out of the school curriculum and indeed out of university courses as well. There are far fewer trained historians now. There are far fewer opportunities to study history at school and university, and that never used to be the case. If we're talking history, really, we can find replacements. I mean, it would just as easily be appropriate if there was a move to replace Winston Churchill, to replace him with Field Marshal Montgomery, who died 50 years ago this month. An equally iconic figure, seen very much in similar terms of winning the Second World War, and would strike exactly the same note. So if there's a sense of tiredness and needing to change the particular image, then we can move on to someone else. But I'm sorry, much as I love fluffy animals, they don't have a place on my banknotes. And who's made this choice? I mean, the young people don't use cash at all.
Indeed. Well, I'm sure we'll keep exploring. But thanks for your time, Peter Caddick-Adams. It's military and NATO historian Peter Caddick-Adams there. I'm just going to bring in the panel for their perspectives on this issue. Now, Sebastian Salek, is this a sort of, storm in a teacup, or, as Frank Furedi and perhaps Sir Roger Scruton, if he were here still with us today, they would say, no, actually, there is something symbolic about this move that actually tells us about how the conversation about who we are is changing?
I think the most striking thing about this move is that it was democratic. This was a consultation. People were asked. They were given all sorts of options. Do you want architecture? Do you want figures? Do you want things from nature? Do you want all sorts? And 60% of them said we want nature. So it was overwhelming, this decision.
Do we know who was in that opinion poll? Like, was it as representative as some of the television audiences we see on other television channels?
I don't know who was in it, but I imagine it was representative. Look, I'm not surprised that Peter wasn't asked. It wasn't a national referendum.
No, I wasn't asked.
But,
if anyone out there is watching this show and they were asked, can you let me know?
By definition in the consultation, most people aren't. But I'd much rather that the people make these decisions rather than an anonymous committee in the Bank of England, the elites, you might call them.
Laura Brown.
So we have to change banknotes every decade or so to prevent fraud. And I wonder if any of you remember what happened last time. The Bank of England got massively cancelled. Activists came for them because there wasn't a woman on the money. And they put Jane Austen on the money. I think it was a good decision. It was very, worth doing. She's a wonderful person. But my theory here is the Bank of England are completely scarred from that furore. They don't want to get cancelled. They don't want controversy. And they've realised that if you have people in historical figures, you can accuse Churchill of being a racist, you can claim there's death minorities, you can say there's no trans people. It never ends. And something like wildlife is much, much easier. And yes, there was a consultation, but nobody seems to have been asked. It seems to have been very, very small. It seems to have been a very, very small consultation.
By definition, they are small.
And there's no guarantee of
They're
a
not national
representative
exercises.
consultation. I don't see why a very small group of people who weren't representatives should get to choose what's on the money. And if you look at the questions put to them, they weren't told, we have had historical figures for 50 years. Do you want to change that in a landmark move? That wasn't what was asked. It was, what would you like on the money? Would you like some architecture or some water voles? So I do think this is a negative process that will erase our sense of pride in our past.
Well, indeed, the debate will rage on, but we're going to move on for now, because coming up in America, the FBI have said that a gunman driving a truck that was filled with explosives who rammed a synagogue in Michigan was a targeted attack of violence against the Jewish community. So we're going to get into this with a top expert, because I want to ask this key question tonight. Are we tolerating too many people who do not tolerate the West? I'm going to talk to a fascinating person who's just written an essay on this very topic in one of our national newspapers. This is Friday Night with me, Matt Goodwin. I'll see you in 1 minute.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
We have a shortage of workers in one sense because the birth rate's so low. We're just not producing enough young people to take the place of those who
we also have a million of those young people.
We also have lots of people, not just young people, people of all ages who are not employed and being paid benefits and no requirement to work.
Well, there's a million.
We've had mass immigration, but then we've also got rising unemployment now because of the bureaucracy, the tax. So we don't need more workers' rights. There's not a problem in terms of workers' rights. There's much more.
You'll get your say in a minute.
And we have coming down the line AI, which is already laying off people. We're going to have more and more people unemployed and unemployable because whatever the AI big bots say, where they say, oh, they'll just lose all of their boring jobs and they'll do a more interesting job. If they could do a more interesting job, they'd be doing it.
And no less a figure than Alan Milburn, former Labour cabinet minister under Blair, who's been brought back by Mark Starmer to run one of his many
He's the employment czar.
Yeah, but he talked only yesterday about what's happening with 1 million people not in employment, training, education, 18 to 25 young people. And he said that it's a dependency culture, and he thinks it will damage them for life. And he said it's going to get worse with AI, and unemployment, we now know, is being predicted to go even higher.
It's bad. It's bad for those young people who are kind of lost. It's bad for communities, and it's bad for the economy. You've got to get them into work, but you don't get them into work by thinking they're just slaves. Like, you give people decent rights, a decent rate of pay, you're more likely to get them into work.
So decent rate of pay, very important. Now, the problem is, though, that if you raise the minimum wage to so close to the median wage, you lose all the kind of differentiation between low-paid jobs and middle-paid jobs. Employers then can't promote people.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Friday Night with me, Matt Goodwin, on GB News, the People's Channel. Now, you have been getting in touch with me. Brendan says, British law rules here. Unless it's Starmer and Hermer, that is, then only international law counts. Whilst Maggie is incensed about the banknotes and the removal of Winston Churchill, saying, I think it's very upsetting to hear that our most revered politician is being removed from the £5 note and replaced by animals. Just what is this country coming to? Maggie, I agree. Now, yesterday in America, a truck laden with explosives ploughed into the Temple Israel Synagogue in Michigan. Ayman Mohammed Ghazali, a 41-year-old US citizen, was born in Lebanon and came to America in 2011. He carried out his attempted anti-Semitic rampage only to be stopped, thank goodness, by brave security guards who safeguarded up to 140 children. Goodness me, could you imagine what would have happened if he'd succeeded? Now, this comes as 2 months ago, the same synagogue appeared to undergo active shooter prevention training, according to Instagram. Just how long can we expect our Jewish communities to live like this? Well, it is a question that I read today, as Telegraph columnist Jake Wallace-Simons wrote in his wonderful article. If you've not read it, I urge you to do so. He says this forces us to ask disturbing questions, writing, the latest attack is yet another reminder that subversives from outside the West, harbouring a loathing of the West, are exploiting the liberties of an open society in an attempt to overturn it. So when will the West start to get serious about the mortal threats in our midst? Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me tonight is Telegraph columnist and presenter of the podcast The Brink, Jake Wallace-Simons. Jake, thank you for joining us tonight, and a wonderful piece. Unfortunately, of course, a piece that, again, you've had to write in the aftermath of another attempted terrorist atrocity against Jewish communities. I just want to, if I can, get your response to this point that you raised in your piece, which is that for too long now, the West has been tolerating people who do not tolerate the West in return. Could you just unpack that for us?
Yeah, well, this is a point that Karl Popper, the philosopher, famously made just after the Second World War in his book, The Open Society and Its Enemies, in which he famously wrote that if we extend unlimited tolerance even to those who are intolerant, if we're not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of the intolerant, then the tolerant will be destroyed and tolerance with them. That famous quote made sense then. It makes sense now when you hear it. And yet our society seems to be led by people who don't understand that simple truth. We, of course, enjoy all the liberties of a free society, and thank God for that. But the problem is that if you fail to police that society against people who seek to destroy it, then they can get into society, begin to manipulate the freedoms that we have in order to bring us down. And this is really the central problem facing the West today, I think, is how to maintain liberalism, the principles of freedom that we all enjoy, and not turn into some fascist state, while at the same time getting tougher on people who are seeking to exploit those opennesses in order to bring us down from within.
So I instinctively completely agree with everything that you've just said, Jake, and I think your discussion of Karl Popper's famous observation, if we extend unlimited tolerance even to those who are intolerant, and if we're not prepared to defend our society against those, then the tolerant in the end will be destroyed. It does raise a question, though, which is, well, what does that mean for, let's say, a government that was serious about doing something about this? What do we do with 41-year-olds from Lebanon who have naturalised, have become US citizens, but decide in response to something that's happened in another country thousands of miles away that they're going to target a synagogue in America? I mean, what do we do in order to draw these lines that you rightly point to when it comes to defending our society from people who refuse to tolerate us?
Well, I think there has to be two parts to a new policy, maybe rolled out by a new and more serious government, hopefully sooner rather than later. The first has got to be a real toughness towards those who seek us harm. Hate preachers should be out. People who rabble-rouse against Jewish communities or against the West as a whole are out. We saw with the defacement of the statue of Winston Churchill just the other day, with anti-Zionist quote-unquote slogans about globalising the Intifada, that hatred of the Jews means hatred of the West and hatred of Britain. So they've got to be out. And we should not be tolerating the intolerant. I mean, this all takes place within the context of the Iranian war. The Ayatollah was killed in his office in Tehran. His office in London remains open. You know, the IRGC, who's under attack in Iran, the Revolutionary Guards, is still not banned in Britain. The ambassador hasn't even been expelled. And they're holding not a march, but a static vigil now for Quds Day, which is an Iranian hate rally, on Sunday, as if the Home Secretary can solve this by preventing them from marching and instead keeping them in one place. Well, that's not the problem, Home Secretary. The problem is that people who hate us are militating against us on our streets with impunity, not whether they're marching or not. So the first part is being much stronger against these people. I think the second is trying to embrace those Muslims and other ethnic minorities who in turn embrace and wish to join our way of life without prejudice or bigotry. Those who want to fly the flag, who want to be proud of being in our society, who want to be one amongst the rest of us, have every right to be here and to be embraced properly without any kind of bigotry. So I think we need to have those two parts, you know, being robust against those who wish to cause us harm and embracing those who wish to be part of us.
Well, I completely agree with you, Jake Wallace-Simons, and I want to thank you for writing such a powerful piece and tell our viewers that you can find that piece obviously online at The Telegraph. I'm just going to bring in my panel now, commissioning editor at The Spectator, Lara Brown, and Labour councillor Sebastian Salek. Lara, if I start with you very briefly, if possible, what do you make of Jake's point here that, look, we got to stop tolerating people who don't tolerate us, but we actually now need to be really hard on this. We've got to actually come up with a policy response to this.
It was an excellent piece, Jake, really, really powerful. This is true. This is an American example. But in America and in Britain, we have seen repeated incidents of terrifying violence against the Jewish community. We've seen synagogues here, synagogues in America, across the West. And you need to have an aggressive policy response to that. You need to have an integration response that tries to stamp out that approach to Jews in British life.
Seb, what's the response to all of this? We can't go on with all of these anti-Semitic terrorist incidents.
No, we can't. And look, it's awful that this happens. It's awful that most Jewish people you speak to, whether it's in Britain or abroad, many of them will tell you they don't feel safe, and almost all of them will tell you a story of repeated flight over the centuries. This is not a new problem. It's been going on for millennia. So I don't think one policy intervention is going to fix it. But I think a culture of tolerance towards Jewish people and intolerance towards those who wish them harm is something that I'd like to see promoted, and indeed is being promoted.
Well, we will continue to watch this space as always. We're going to turn back to the UK after a short break to look at the asylum system chaos that has been unfolding this week. Two asylum seekers, I read these stories every week, but this one again is utterly ridiculous, have been jailed for running a county lines operation from a taxpayer-funded hotel, as it's also revealed that up to 2/3 of all the funding that has gone to police the small boat crossings in the Channel has come from, you guessed it, British taxpayers. Well, this is Friday Night with Matt Goodwin, only on GB News. We're going to be debating that asylum chaos in 1 minute. See you shortly.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Looking a bit wet in Mallorca and Minorca this Saturday, but it should be clearing through by Sunday. Some showers in southern Italy, a brisk breeze, but some sunny spells for Madeira and the Canaries. Sunshine returning to the Algarve also. There's that showery rain heading south across the Balearics. We'll see some of that rain turning up in Corsica and Sardinia later on Saturday. A few showers in southern Italy, mostly fine in Greece, but maybe some showers here on Sunday. The sun returning to Barcelona Sunday.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It'll be a chilly start to the weekend, but Saturday is looking like a dry and bright day for most of us. It does all change as we head towards Sunday, however, which is, of course, Mothering Sunday. Through this evening, we'll see this weather front push southeastwards, bringing the focus of some showers. We've still got northwesterly winds, though, so further showers will move into parts of western Scotland as well as Northern Ireland overnight. But a risk of rain pushing into the southeast overnight, but it does tend to fizzle away. So for most of us, by the early hours of Saturday, it's going to be a largely dry and clear picture, but a chilly one. Temperatures falling away below zero across parts of Wales as well as Scotland. Could be down as low as -4 to start the day on Saturday, but there will be more in the way of sunshine. So that chilly feel shouldn't last all that long. That is away from the far north of Scotland, however, because further showers are expected into Saturday, still falling as snow above around 400 metres, so not quite as low as it was throughout today. Parts of Northern Ireland seeing a bright start, but it's Wales and England seeing the best of the sunshine to start the day. There's still a few showers just clipping the far west coast of Cornwall, however. But for most of us, it should be a dry day on Saturday, away from those showers across the far north. Lighter winds as well, so it won't feel too bad in the sunshine. Still some cloud coming in across western areas, a risk of showers spreading into the southwest later on. But in the best of the sunshine, 10 or 11 degrees, a little higher than today, much closer to average as well. Still quite chilly though in the wind across the far north, but the chillier feel does return by the end of Sunday. Wet and windy weather pushing across the country on Sunday, so a rather unsettled day. Not a brilliant one to be getting out and about, but I hope you have some indoor lunchtime plans for Sunday. The unsettled weather does continue into the start of next week, but there are signs of the spring sunshine returning later on. Bye-bye.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Dordme, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Friday Night with me, Matt Goodwin, on GB News, the People's Channel. And you have been getting in touch. Kate says, we have a chicken in number 10 Downing Street, so maybe one of our notes would be rather apt. Changing the banknotes from Winston Churchill to a chicken, indeed. Well, here are 3 stories about our broken asylum system this week that you might have missed. First, we were told of the case of Mohammed Dawood and Al-Saud Abdul Khalik. They have been jailed for running a county lines drug operation from a taxpayer-funded migrant hotel. The Roundhouse Hotel in Bournemouth was the site where the 2 Egyptian nationals dealt crack cocaine and heroin. Meanwhile, at a parliamentary committee meeting in Paris, it's been revealed that up to 2/3 of all of the funding that has gone on policing the small boats in the Channel has come from British taxpayers. And it's making a massive difference, isn't it? And a whistle-stop tour of Britain's asylum chaos would not be complete without local people's voices in this country, British taxpayers being completely and utterly sidelined and silenced. Epping Forest District Council wanted to challenge the ruling that housed migrants in the Bell Hotel, but it is now being revealed that the council cannot appeal the High Court decision allowing asylum seekers to remain in the hotel. In fact, more than £500,000 has been spent fighting the case, and thousands of local people have been protesting outside the hotel. So tonight I want to ask, based on these 3 stories, is our asylum system completely and utterly broken? With me tonight to debate this is commissioning editor at The Spectator, Lara Brown, and Labour councillor for Waltham Forest Council, Councillor Sebastian Salek. Seb, you look at those 3 stories, Our asylum system is completely and utterly broken, is it not?
I don't think so. I was digging into the data, and there's a lot of positive story to be told. Look, I'll pull them up and we can walk through them, because look, you can go through those individual stories, and what those guys did was awful, and arguably you could argue that the system is working. They've been tried, they've been sent to prison, and look, they are pretty good candidates to be deported, aren't they? If you come over here and seek asylum and then commit a crime like that...
Sorry to interrupt. Can I ask why the system failed to work when Dawood was previously convicted of possession of Class A drugs, and then before that found by the CPS to have been involved in a brawl where 6 people were stabbed? Why didn't the system work then?
No, that's a great question, and that was in, I think the latest one was in January 2024, so that was on the Tories' watch. So I don't know why they didn't take action.
Just to be clear for the readers, so these guys in 2024, early 24, they were involved in crimes, they were convicted of stuff, but they weren't deported.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, please,
so you'd have to ask a Conservative why they weren't deported, because I think there'd be a pretty strong case for that.
I'm not here to defend a Conservative.
I know you're not. I'm just making the point that there's a voice here that aren't able to speak for themselves. But look, if you look at the stats, since Labour came into power, you've got initial decisions down, success rates down, you've got enforced deportations up, you've got broader deportations up, you've got deportations of foreign national offenders up, the backlog is starting to be cleared, it's all...
The backlog's being cleared?
Well, yes.
We have 80,000 people waiting for an appeal decision this year, and we had 40,000 last year. That's a doubling.
So hang on, ask yourself why appeals are going up. Think of this as a pipeline. If you've got the first step, which is we're going to process your initial claim, which the Tories weren't doing, Labour are, what's the next step? It's the appeals. That bulge is just moving along the pipeline.
I think that'd be much more compelling if the average wait time wasn't 62 weeks.
I don't understand how that's related to it. It's quite a simple pipeline, and we're just seeing these numbers move along the pipeline. But what I'll also say is that the appeals rate is falling. The success rate is falling. So the number of people who are saying, hang on, can I have a second go? Can I have asylum? The Home Office are saying no.
Haven't we also learned, though, this week that the Labour government is also going to offer £40,000 to failed asylum seekers to go home, to go back to their countries of origin? Isn't that just, Laura Brown, another enormous incentive to try and get into Britain illegally? Because, hey, if it turns out your asylum claim is not successful, you still might get 40 grand to leave.
Well, the issue Shabana has right now is that the appeals process is extremely expensive and the law isn't on her side because she's bound by the ECHR via the Human Rights Act. And that means she has to deal with endless appeals. She has to deal with Strasbourg case law. She's got to deal with really strange judgments like if you have diabetes, you have a human right to the NHS. And she's praying to not have to go through that. So she's been forced to chuck 40 grand at the problem rather than fix the legal infrastructure that is governing all of these claims, which is why the wait time is so long. Because you can endlessly appeal. You can go to the ECHR, you can take a human rights appeal. That's why we're looking at 62 weeks in a hotel before you have a judgment.
Well, don't you think that these people have a legal right, like anybody else does? The reason universal rights are universal is because they apply to all of us, whether you're somebody who's fled Afghanistan under the Taliban or someone like you and I who may have been born in this country. We are all covered by those same protections.
No, I would abolish the ECHR. I think that it's being abused in a ridiculous way. I think it doesn't work for asylum claims, and I think our generosity as British taxpayers is being taken advantage of.
So I think there's probably some area of agreement we can find here, because I do think there's scope to change how ECHR is applied, because there are those edge cases where it's abused. But broadly, do you not think that human rights should be universal?
What do you mean by human rights?
I mean the Human Rights Act, which is the ECHR imported into English law.
No, I don't think that should be universal. I think it's a very, very bad act taken from a really strange piece of living legislation which was not built for our time, and I don't think it works. You have a situation where anybody can basically claim they're gay without proof, claim they're being persecuted without proof, and they can stay in Britain.
So hang on, we're talking about two different things here. You're saying you don't agree with the Human Rights Act, which is fine, and we can debate that. But what I'm asking you is, should human rights as a concept be universal?
You're being ridiculous now, because I asked you what human rights were, and you said human rights are what is in the Human Rights Act.
Yes.
I don't agree with, so obviously I don't think they're universal.
So what's your interpretation of human rights?
Well, we're getting a little bit off topic. Isn't the issue here that the human rights that we have currently appear to be operationalised while undermining the human rights of the British people?
How so?
Well, by subjecting them to illegal migration, by subjecting them to the sexual abuse of children, by subjecting them to these drug dealers who are using British people's money.
It's been a while since I've revisited the Human Rights Act. I was a law student a long time ago, but I don't remember an article that gives people a human right not to have asylum seekers in their country.
The ECHR is clearly being weaponised to advantage people who are entering our country illegally over the people who are playing by the rules, who are paying taxes.
And this is where we probably will find some agreement, because I think there are edge cases where it is being abused, and we have to talk about how human rights are interpreted.
But this is where your whole argument falls down. You've been lecturing me, saying that human rights should be completely universal. Your only version of human rights in your head is the Human Rights Act. And now you're saying, of course, there are edge cases where the Human Rights Act isn't working, which is the opposite of universal.
Well, no, because the whole point of human rights, let me just make this point very quickly because it's incredibly important, is that they interact with each other and they're deliberately broad, so they fall to interpretation. And what I'm saying we should revisit is that interpretation.
Well, we have a right of reply that I do legally have to read out, so hold that thought for now, because on the French patrols, the Home Office has defended the partnership, insisting cooperation with France is delivering results. Joint operations have helped block 40,000 crossings under this government, a spokesman said. The Home Office had previously said, "We are furious at the level of illegal migrants, but we are restoring order and control to our borders." Almost 50,000 illegal migrants have been removed or deported from British soil under this government, up nearly a quarter. And the Home Secretary has announced the most sweeping reforms to tackle illegal migration in decades, removing the incentives that bring illegal migrants to the UK and scaling up the return of those with no right to be here. Well, there we are. Coming up, is this a blasphemy law by the back door? Free speech campaigners are planning a legal challenge to block Labour's definition of anti-Muslim hostility. It's been dominating the media this week, as a dozen Labour councils have told schools that children's drawings of religious figures could be considered blasphemous under Sharia law. We're going to talk about that with a top expert, Andrew Gilligan, a guy who really knows his stuff, in 1 minute. This is Friday Night with Matt Goodwin on GB News.
GB Loyalty Points is here. They're our way of saying thank you for spending time with GB News. Through commenting on your say, voting in You Decide polls and shaping the debate, you can earn GB Loyalty Points. Unlock rewards, reach milestones and climb leaderboards. Don't just watch our programmes, come and be part of them. Get started by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/loyalty points.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pearce.
And me, Miriam Cates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
Bold. They are under no illusion.
Ray.
Are you a human trafficker?
Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get us on a BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines.
The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it?
From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
I'm going to do now, they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Breaking news, live updates, stories that matter.
From the heart of the GB newsroom to every corner of Britain, with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
GB News bulletins are there to deliver the latest news that matters to you.
Bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Friday Night with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, has a blasphemy law been introduced through the back door in our country? Free speech campaigners are about to mount a legal challenge in an attempt to scupper Labour's new definition of anti-Muslim hostility. I'm sure you've heard about it this week. The Free Speech Union claimed the definition was so subjective it could be weaponised to silence legitimate criticism of the Islamic faith and Muslims. Conversely, the government has said that their new definition provides clarity and consistency and protects free speech. Of course, this has not allayed concerns of campaigners who fear mission creep from the new guidance, which, of course, will now be given to schools, universities, local government and more. In fact, in Northern England, guidance that has been sent to schools which is called Sharing the Journey, has given this advice to local schools. It was flagged by popular historian Tom Holland. Students should not reproduce images of Jesus, the Prophet Muhammad or other figures considered to be prophets in Islam. This attempt to safeguard Britain's Muslim community comes as Home Office data has also revealed that hate crimes against Muslims are almost twice as likely to result in prosecution than hate crimes against British Jews. So is this new definition an imperfect attempt to ease community tensions, or is it simply a censor's charter? Well, we're now going to speak with Senior Fellow at Policy Exchange, Andrew Gilligan, who has written extensively on this definition of anti-Muslim hostility, and courageously, if I might add. Andrew, lots of people out there saying, look, what's the big problem here? What is the issue with this, with countering anti-Muslim hostility? Well, what is the big issue here?
So, look, everyone agrees anti-Muslim hostility, anti-Muslim hatred and discrimination are wrong, but they're already illegal. They're illegal against people of any faith on the grounds of their faith. And as you said just now, there are prosecutions, more than twice as many prosecutions for hatred against Muslims as against hatred against Jews. So the purpose of this is to confer additional protections on Muslims that people of other faiths and no faiths don't have. It's a two-tier policy in its purest form. In some ways, it's crude electoral politics. Labour's pandering to Muslim voters whose votes it's lost since the election. In other ways, I think it's just this misguided idea that it will improve community cohesion. It will do the exact opposite. Because, you know, what creates social tension is the perception that people aren't being treated fairly, that people are being treated differently depending on their race or their religion or whatever. Now, in the past, that unfairness is often manifested through traditional racism, traditional white against black racism. And of course, that's still there. There's a lot of that still around. It hasn't gone away. But increasingly, it's also manifesting itself through the way the authorities are pandering to minorities and giving minorities privileges and rights which other groups don't have. And this is a pretty good example of that.
And the argument being that essentially this is going to fuel grievance politics, a sense of victimisation, perhaps within Muslim communities, and also curtailing free speech. Let's just talk about this free speech issue, because one of the things I find absolutely mind-boggling, viewers will remember the school teacher in Batley who was basically forced into hiding because they happened to have offended local Muslims when they actually were teaching what was in the national curriculum at the time. They were talking about portrayals of religious figures. In that same area today, schools are being given guidance that is saying children should not draw religious figures such as Jesus, such as Muhammad, because Muslim parents might be offended by that. In fact, teachers should also tread carefully around things like drama, art and physical education because of sensibilities within Muslim communities.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost exactly 5 years since that teacher was forced into hiding, where he remains 5 years on. And I think it's no coincidence, incidentally, that one of the people who stood up in the Houses of Parliament more or less the minute the new definition was announced by the government and called for it to be used against politicians, against speech. That man, Iqbal Mohammed, he's the MP for Batley. So we're not going to hear any protections from free speech or protections for people being forced into hiding for 5 years from him. I think, to be fair, I don't think it was quite just a national curriculum the teacher gave. He showed caricatures of the Prophet. But nonetheless, I do think that this guidance you just referred to is pretty worrying. I haven't read it myself, but if there's a suggestion that children of all faiths should be prevented from drawing Jesus Christ, for instance, that's pretty serious.
I mean, where does this go from here? Because if we were to take a big kind of macro view of the country, Muslim population currently around 5-6%. If you look at, serious, respected forecasts, by the end of this century will be somewhere around 25%. We're going to see a sort of 3-4-fold increase. Is this just the start of skirmishes around free speech, free expression, blasphemy? Or are we going to somehow be able to carve out a consensus, a compromise, some sort of place where we say, no, actually, we are a free society. We are a liberal democracy. We're not going to compromise on this. If you participate in our educational system, you are going to have to follow how we do things.
Look, whether you agree with those figures or not, and they feel high to me, 25% feels high, but whether you agree with those figures or not, there's going to be very substantial numbers of religious and ethnic minorities in this country, that they are a part of this country, they're citizens of this country, and we all have to live together. And one of the most crucial things about making that work is treating everybody the same, treating everybody fairly and impartially. And that goes for racism against, black people, it goes for anti-Muslim hostility against Muslims, but it also goes for white people and non-Muslims being treated less favourably because of their faith.
Just a brief comment, if we can, from Labour councillor Sebastian Saleh. What do you make of this? Is it a two-tier policy? I mean, are we actually generating special protections here for Muslims that are not present for other groups?
Well, we aren't, though, because the most important part of all of this, whether you're talking about the anti-Muslim hatred definition or you're talking about what's going on in the guidance in schools up in Yorkshire, is that it's all advisory. No new laws are being made. Nobody's being forced to do anything. Nobody's being banned from doing anything. They're just being told to do it.
Very briefly, Lara Brown.
I think two things here. Why would you make advice that is so bad that it can't be turned into law? And secondly, the government's about to do a grooming gang inquiry. Would it be permissible under this guidance to look at the link between Islam, which is a thing that Muslims tend to believe in, and the motivations for these crimes? And I think it would be, and therefore it's uncountable.
OK, well, we do have a right of reply from Calderdale Council here, which says this: the Sharing the Journey guidance was produced in 2023 to support schools in promoting understanding and sensitivity. It is advisory guidance rather than a rule or instruction, and decisions about classroom activities are made by individual schools, head teachers and governing bodies based on their own circumstances. The guidance does not place a ban on pupils drawing religious figures, and schools retain discretion over how they approach teaching in this area. GB News has contacted the Department for Education for comment, but is yet to hear back. We will, of course, bring you this once we receive it. Well, there you go. It was only advisory. I leave you to consider the implications and ramifications for that. Now, thank you for joining me this evening. Friends of GB News, you have been voting and the results are in. Should Winston Churchill be removed from our banknotes? Wow, this is a North Korea-style result. Look at this. This is a result that I think those Iranians would appreciate. 98% say no. Patrick Christis tonight is coming up after me, hosted by Nana Akua. Nana, what is coming up in your wonderful show tonight?
Oh, well, Matt, we have a fabulous audience here. Yeah. Well, of course, we have to talk. We have to talk about our Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, who is, I'm sorry, but he's an utter embarrassment. I mean, did you see what happened at the nursery? Oh, God. Also, the Bell Hotel. Sadly, the council lost. Will this set a precedent? Stay tuned. Loads more to come after your weather.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It'll be a chilly start to the weekend, but Saturday is looking like a dry and bright day for most of us. It does all change as we head towards Sunday, however, which is, of course, Mothering Sunday. Through this evening, we'll see this weather front push south-eastwards, bringing the focus of some showers. We've still got northwesterly winds, though, so further showers will move into parts of western Scotland as well as Northern Ireland overnight. But a risk of rain pushing into the southeast overnight, but it does tend to fizzle away. So for most of us, by the early hours of Saturday, it's going to be a largely dry and clear picture, but a chilly one. Temperatures falling away below zero across parts of Wales as well as Scotland. Could be down as low as -4 to start the day on Saturday, but there will be more in the way of sunshine. So that chilly feel shouldn't last all that long. That is away from the far north of Scotland, however, because further showers are expected into Saturday. Still falling as snow above around 400 metres, so not quite as low as it was throughout today. Parts of Northern Ireland seeing a bright start, but it's Wales and England seeing the best of the sunshine to start the day. There's still a few showers just clipping the far west coast of Cornwall, however. But for most of us, it should be a dry day on Saturday, away from those showers across the far north. Lighter winds as well, so it won't feel too bad in the sunshine. Still some cloud coming in across western areas, a risk of showers spreading into the southwest later on. But in the best of the sunshine, 10 or 11 degrees, a little higher than today, much closer to average as well. Still quite chilly though in the wind across the far north, but the chillier feel does return by the end of Sunday. Wet and windy weather pushing across the country on Sunday, so a rather unsettled day. Not a brilliant one to be getting out and about, but I hope you have some indoor lunchtime plans for Sunday. The unsettled weather does continue into the start of next week, but there are signs of the spring sunshine returning later on. Bye-bye.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
It's a prize package worth over £92,000. There's a totally tax-free £25,000 in cash that you'll be able to spend on anything you like this year. Plus, you'll also get to drive away in a brand new Benevan 122 camper van. Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, this latest 2026 model comes fully loaded with everything you'd expect. For another chance to win a camper van and cash, text prize to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB20 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of May. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
We love Great Britain. We love its history, its culture and its tradition, and that's why we're so proud to be part of GB News.
You look genuinely emotional. Oh, come here.
GB News does pay attention to those who are ignored by the mainstream media. The majority of this country whose forefathers fought and died to maintain liberty, to fight for freedom of speech.
The rule of law, the rights of property and democracy. This is the heritage that our country should be so proud of.
Which of course includes our Christian heritage. There's been a huge resurgence in the number of people going to church. Perhaps they're not finding what they're looking for, and they're looking for something a bit deeper, a bit more truthful, a bit more akin to Britain's Christian heritage.
That's right, get ready, because the most exciting night in general election history starts now!
I love you, I want that orange. Nice to see you, mate. Nice to see you. Oh, God. Hello. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Yeah. And good evening to you at home. It is 9 o'clock. I'm Nana Aquia in for Patrick Christie's Tonight. Islamic doctrine is being encouraged for children in British schools. I'll bring you all the details. Meanwhile, development in the Iran war.
We know the new so-called not-so-supreme leader is wounded and likely disfigured.
The US continues to ramp up the rhetoric against Iran, but is the new Ayatollah still alive? Plus...
Here comes the heat from the USA! Pins down, what a strike!
Yes, unfortunately, that's probably more like friendly fire. But did the US go too far on social media? Back here in Britain,